Creepy. I don't like it in here.
Hey, what's the matter with you?
Where did he go?
Wild. Put your soul into it. Wild. What's going on around here?
I formed it in 1979. That was when I turned 18 years old. I thought I was old enough, and decided I needed to do some serious work. So I started a company called the Searcher Group, and started from there, and progressed. I'm in my 42nd year with the company. Yeah, I basically started off by myself, and I just went to look at. People would call me or tell me about a haunted location, and I would go out and investigate, or I would ask for authorization to get into certain buildings and see what they had going on that were reputed to be haunted. And then you would go in and find out if it was true, or if it wasn't true. And as I progressed, and my brother was a teen. Yeah, it definitely wasn't popular. Uh, Nothing like today is. Most people, we talked about this subject. Most people, it was taboo. We didn't talk about it. We were kind of crazy for thinking that stuff. But it was interesting. The demographics was very interesting, and how it worked is, if you were in a group, social situation with, 4 or 5 people, and you brought the subject up, they would sort of look at you like you were crazy. But the same person's looking at you like you were crazy on a one-to-one basis would have all kinds of questions. So there was a lot of interest, but not openly. You just sort of didn't talk about it too much. It wasn't accepted. It's sort of like if you were to talk about UFOs 10 years ago, people would look at you like you're something wrong with you. So yeah, it was difficult. It was a difficult thing, and but it was a lot more open to the idea when you're talking about business owners. So if somebody owned a business that was reputedly haunted, it was pretty easy to get into that building after hours. They would say, "Yeah, go ahead, have a look. Here's the key." So it was kind of cool that way. Today, you need insurance. You need a bodyguard. You have to leave fingerprints at the door. So it was a lot easier back then in certain ways. Mind you, we didn't have the technology that we do today. Yeah, so everything today is simple. It's digital. You can download it to your computer. You can enhance things. Back then, you were using 35 millimeter film or a Polaroid, Instamatic, and I mean, anybody that does investigations knows you go to a location, you're taking hundreds of photographs, and 35 mil, unless you had a darkroom, it was expensive. You had to go in, you had to drop it off at the drugstore or wherever, and then you had to go in and pay for every print. So, and you didn't know if you had anything or not, so you paid for everything. You took it home, you looked at it, and it was, it wasn't on a computer. There was no computer back then. So you were using magnifying glasses and stuff like that. We were using tape recorders and, baby powder or flour. You would lay it out on a bag in a doorway somewhere and see if anything left prints. So there was a lot of challenges. We didn't know there were challenges back then because we didn't know that this technology would exist. But we didn't have internet. If you wanted to research something, you would have to go somewhere and look it up, or write a letter to somebody and hope for a reply. Absolutely. I still use I use the new tech, but I also use some of the old tech. I like old school stuff. I've discovered you can leave a digital recorder recording in a room with a audio cassette tape recorder next to it, and you will get more EVPs on audio cassette than you will on a DVD recorder. So why that is, I think it has something to do with the electromagnetic frequencies, but they seem to work better. So yeah, you're looking at the same recording equipment, same time, same room, and one's detecting things and the other one's not. So there's advantages, disadvantages. The greatest advantage is going into a place and shooting hundreds of photographs and coming home downloading it on the computer. It didn't cost me a cent. So, and there's so many tools to enhance those photos and see if you actually capture it. Well, it's electromagnetic. So I've heard of, I haven't seen them personally, but I've heard of cases where brand new cassette tapes still in the cellophane will have messages on it from a haunted location. Sitting in the guy's bag, not even open, brand new. He takes them out, puts them in. Instead of pushing record, he pushes play, and there's messages on it. So sometimes it's not coming through the microphone. There's been several different cases. Different people have reported the same type of phenomena. One of them did experiments on it. It was let me just check here. Yeah, the skull experiment. They would use not only cassette tape, but they used Polaroid film, brand new film, left in the container, never used. Even the Polaroid film on that was the package was finally opened and examined. There was images on it. It never been through a camera. Never seen a camera. So it's interesting how that happens. I mean, that's if you can figure out how that works, you'd probably be rich. The old tech. I mean, you couldn't fool around with that stuff, really. I mean, unless you were, some kind of super genius, or you worked for Kodak Eastman. You took a 35 millimeter photograph, and you had a negative, and it could be examined. You could see that's the original. It wasn't tampered with, so evidence was evidence. Today with all the stuff we have, with Photoshop and all this nonsense, this is why the skeptics are killing us, because with all the technology we have today, anything can be faked. You have CGI, you have all kinds of stuff. And that's sort of unfortunate for us. Yeah, proof is a funny thing. It's you need to, it's like writing a media story. You need more sources than just one source. And I'll give you a great example of that. One of the investigations I was doing, we captured electronic voice phenomena, or an EVP, of two spirits having a communication together. It was a young man and an older woman, and the young man called the older woman by name. He said, "Miriam, they're here." And she replied. She goes, "Thank you." So we had a name, Miriam. So that's interesting. It's not evidence. It's not proof. There's no proof involved there, but it's interesting. Several weeks later, we had a medium come to the location. Our mediums are tested and true, and they have no information about the site. We don't, they're just picked up and driven there, and then they give us a reading or whatever they're going to do. And she came in and she detected an older woman, and she said she detected her name was Miriam. Now that is really interesting, because that's two sources now. One's an EVP a couple of weeks ago, and now this medium is saying there's a Miriam here. So fast forward another month, and we were talking to the owner of the property, and mentioned the name of this lady, and she said, "Oh, that's familiar." So she said, "We were doing renovation work, and we took some of the wall out, the plaster, because it was an old place, and put drywall in. And then we found old newspapers and magazines. They used to use them for insulation back then. And so she said, you want to look at them? We looked at them, and some of the mail delivery labels on the magazines were addressed to Miriam. So that's evidence. I have 3 sources that tell me this woman lived in that house, and it's corroborated through historical data. So how you dispute that kind of evidence? I'm sure there's skeptics out there who can come up with some crazy idea, but to me, that's great evidence. Yeah, and you have to do your due diligence. It's historical research. Once you have that name, you have to you can go to the archives, you can go to neighbors, you can go to tax rolls, find out who lived in certain areas. Depending, I mean, you can only go back 100 years. Or up to 100 years. You can't. So it's 2020. I can only go back to 1920. I can't see 1921, for example, right, because of the privacy laws. So if she was there between 18 something and 1920, then I can grab that information. If she was there after the 1920s, then it's sealed. I can't look at it. So there's some challenges, but you can get around those things by, talking to neighbors. Long-term neighbors might remember these people. Going to City Hall, see who owned the property or rented the property, things like that. So, yeah, you have to do your due diligence. And then once you have all the information, then you can tag it as evidence. All our investigations are long-term investigations. And there's 2 different ones. The call for help, somebody's got something going on in their house or their business or whatever. You have to sort of clear those quick. So that could take a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. But you want to try and resolve it because privacy issues, you don't want surveillance running in somebody's house, especially bedrooms and stuff, people living there. So you have to be really careful what you're doing. So you want to get in and out as fairly quickly as you can while trying to resolve the issue for them. And then there's the second type of investigation, which is pure research. So that's a vacant building, government owns it, or a private company owns it. It's reputed to be haunted, and you ask for permission to use that building. So a prime example is I did a great deal of work for the city of Mississauga, and they gave me a house that was reported haunted, and they signed it off for 3 years. I had carte blanche. I just came and went when I wanted to. I set up surveillance. I did all my work. I expanded the perimeter because we discovered that some of the spirits from that house were traveling to a different house across the road. So we had to seek out who owned that property and get permission. It was abandoned as well. It was boarded up. It was owned by Hydro. We got permission to extend our investigation to that house, which was an old farm. So we had both properties going, and we used that for 3 years. A lot of our investigations, that type of investigations, will always last 2, 3. The longest one I've done is a 6-year investigation, which was my first book. I actually have 5 books, 5 books published all through Dundurn Press in Toronto. And my first one was called Overshadows, True Canadian Haunting, and it was an old estate down in Etobicoke. Very haunted. Very interesting story. Fascinating story. It had to do with the Second World War and how the homeowners, the property owners, were arrested for complicity during the Second World War with ties to Italy. And So when they were interred, there was a guy, and it was kind of funny at the time. So there was a guy put in charge of the property. He used to work there for the family. He was a very nasty individual, and he hated women. He hated animals, uh, just like children. Just a nasty kind of guy. Um, and he made a deal with an abortionist. Now this is the 40s, right? Who used to work for some gangsters not far from this location, to come down and apply his trade. He gets a kickback. He can use the property and get a kickback. So he would do that. And one of the spirits there was a young female. She's angry about it. First of all, second of all, she certainly wanted out of the floor. She wanted a proper burial. But so we got involved with that, and of course this individual Edward, who was the nasty guy. Well, he doesn't like his secrets told, so he was terrorizing the family living in the house there. Oh, it was one of the craziest hauntings I've ever seen. The guy who was living in the house called me. He says, "I got some problems." See, there was a young girl that lived in that house that he lived in. He took it over afterwards, and she had committed suicide. And then she came back. The spirit of her came back to the house. She loved the house. And he called me. He said, "You got to come over here." And this was my basic introduction to this property. And I said, "Yeah, I'll be right there." And we went over and met him at the back door. He was standing outside. We walked into the kitchen. And all you could hear upstairs, it sounded like somebody wearing army boots running up and down the hall, slamming doors. And I looked at him and I said, "What's going on? Who's up there?" And he said, "We're the only guys in the house." So that was my introduction. I went up there and checked every room, looked under every bed, checked every window, I looked everywhere. There was no one up there. And that was my introduction to the house. And I got crazier from there. Well, that lasted 6 years. Because every time I found a piece of information, I had, 2 dozen more questions. So the information just kept coming and coming and coming. And I don't know if you want to say there was an intervention but I mean, they were helping me on the investigation. So it went from a privately owned property to this rich guy that got interred, to a family that bought it in 1950 and then redeveloped the whole property, which was a large property. They were building buildings and all kinds of stuff, but they left the original mansion. And so I asked, my brother was involved with me at the time. He came down and he talked to the owners, and he said, "They have a big file room. It goes all the way back to when they first bought the place. Do you want to look and see if we can find some information?" And I said, "Sure." And we walked into it's an underground tunnel because he used to run booze back in the early days. And he said, "Do you want to go down there?" I said, "Yeah." So we went down into the tunnels, and there was all these files. And as soon as I walked in, I was disheartened because there was just millions of boxes and crates. I mean, you could tell some of the crates are the old Coca-Cola and Canada Dry crates from the 50s. The dust and the dead bugs, it was just crazy. And I said, "No, you're never going to find nothing here, man. You can spend 2 years in here." And I turned around and I was about to leave, and there was an old crate, a wooden crate sitting there. There's a little piece of paper sticking up like a flag. And I pulled it out, and it was talking. That paper was dated from 1950, the year they started building on that property. And it was one of the first tenants, and he was talking about the ghostly activity in that particular address that I was looking at. I mean, it was handed to me.
Oh,
There's
wow.
no way. There's no way I should have found it. It's an impossibility, but it was handed to me, and we almost got her out of the floor. Um, but then once we started finding odd things, the owner said, "Yeah, go dig it out." And we chopped out the floor, and we were finding flagstones, heavy, heavy flagstones that matched the fireplace, uh, 2 feet down. And I said, well, "Why would they be here?" And so we had to get a Hilti gun to chop those blocks up. And the owner just said, "No, that's enough." I guess he got nervous for whatever reason, and he told us that was enough there. He brought in a contractor to pour concrete, and he had to report that concrete 3 times. It just wouldn't sell right, but he finally did it, and that's a tragedy because she should have been pulled out. She should have had a proper burial. Yeah, he was absolutely convinced that we were onto it because we found a piece of bone 2 feet down below one of the hearth rocks, and that's when he shut us down. Maybe his grandfather was into bad stuff too, and he didn't know who buried who where, right? So I don't know.
You know
Who
what,
knows?
which one being found probably, so.
Yeah. Not that I'm saying they did anything like that. I'm just
Mm.
off the top of my head. Why would you shut something down like that? I mean, we're so close. It's disheartening. Usually it's one location, but a couple of books. Like my second book was a collection of ghost stories from Ontario, and the back half of the book were small investigations that we did. Uh, oh, and then the third book was the one I was telling you about in Mississauga, where I had that property for 3 years. That was called Ghosts. And then the fourth book was Ghosts of the Canadian National Exhibition. The manager of the archives wanted to speak with me. We spoke for a while about a haunting in her particular building, because there's plenty of buildings down there on the property. And I just asked her, I said, "Well, am I working on this or what?" She said, "Yeah, I thought you were." So there was a bit of a timeline, so I had to get that done, but it's still 13 months I spent on the property with my brother and team, and I think we did a great job. And the fifth book was called Meeting Place of the Dead, and that was out near Georgetown, very old property down there. That was very interesting place, quite an active place. I think we cataloged 13 different spirits there. Most of them very pleasant. Some of them not, but most of them very pleasant. Yeah, I'm retired now. I did 37 years within law enforcement and security, different private securities, corporate stuff, and worked at some universities. But yeah, a lot of the skill sets you need, or I find that are helpful, are the same skill sets you would use in that field. For example, how to investigate, how surveillance works, securing evidence, handling evidence, talking with witnesses, taking testimony, report writing, doing research. So a lot of those skill sets are interchangeable. You use them in the field, being whether you're investigating a homicide, or whether you're investigating a person that's already dead, and you want to find out who it might be. So yeah, a lot of those skills are interchangeable. And, when you look at what we do in the paranormal field, you're only dealing with questionable subject matter about 5% of the time, which is that paranormal, ghostly, haunting thing. But the other 95% is all tested true, scientific, proven to work uh, techniques. All right, whether you're using specific equipment, or using specific surveillance or law enforcement techniques to gain information. So really, the more you can learn, the better off it is. The more information you understand. People should understand that, all these different things help. Just looking at architecture, to look at the house and know that's a salt box design from the 1840s, tells you something about the construction of the house, what type of materials were used. Is there how heating and air conditioning works? What kind of noises do they make? What kind of drafts can they cause? So anything you can look at and learn is a plus. If you have, the more knowledge you have, the better you are to tackle some of these hard questions. Not everything's paranormal. People go in and go, "Oh, did you hear that?" Yeah, it's a radiator and it pings once in a while because it's heating up or cooling down. So the more information you have, the better equipped you are. So, there's a wide variety of skill sets that you can learn and look at. Well, it's important. If you feel that it's an important piece of evidence, it gets expensive. For example, you're using a digital camera, you might have an expensive, high quality SD card, but you might have captured one fantastic photograph. That doesn't mean you transfer that photograph to your computer, clear the SD card, and take the camera back in the field. No. That SD card has to be secured. You can transfer a copy of the picture for analysis, but that SD card with the original photographs has to be secured. And this is where it gets expensive, because that's going to have all the metadata, the true metadata, everything that's going to be analyzed on that SD card. It's going to show that it wasn't tampered with, and you have to handle it properly. It's got to be sealed, signed, dated, and locked away. And that way, if there's any scrutiny down the road and say, "Well, I don't know about this. You could have did it on Photoshop. Here's the evidence. Here's the SD." So, things get expensive. People really don't want to get into that kind of expense. I mean, it's already expensive to buy equipment, right? You buy maybe a $400, $500 camera, and now you're going to start locking SD cards up and stuff like that. I mean, batteries alone, a buck a battery now. So, a weekend out is, you're looking at $60 in batteries.
yeah, true that. We do that every time we go. We always stock up on the batteries, before we head out somewhere. So we are clubbed.
Yeah, and you can't use cheap stuff. It's got to be the good, high quality stuff, and then you get into a site where something kills your batteries, drains them, and so now you're looking at how much money. But that's the joy of the work. Yeah, absolutely. When I worked, well, a lot of the jobs will teach you that. But my dad taught me that when I was 7 years old. If you're gonna get into something, make sure you can get out of it. And that was those very wise words coming from my father, and I took heed of it, and I always carried that with me, and it served me very well. Doing some of the jobs I did. So yeah, always have an exit plan. Doesn't matter what you do, whether it's on the job or you do dangerous work, or even if you don't do dangerous work. You could be out with your girlfriend or your wife at a restaurant. Well, you should have an exit plan. You should know if something goes wrong, which things tend to do. Say there's a truck accident in front of the restaurant and there's a fire. How do you get out? You should already know that. The panic with 70 other people to figure it out at the moment is the wrong way to go. You should always know your surroundings. You should always have some idea what you're going to do in the inevitable, and you're never caught off guard. Not ever caught off guard. You should always expect that strange thing to come out of nowhere. And 99.9% of the time, it doesn't. But try and catch me off guard. That's my team. It can't be done. So, because I expect the unexpected always.
Yeah, for sure.
I was working a night shift one time. I was on the phone. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and one of my staff walked past my office and threw a firecracker in there. I didn't even flinch. It went off. I mean, it was deafening. It went off, and I didn't miss a beat. I just carried on my phone conversation, and he was pretty upset because I didn't even flinch. Because I expect that from people. That's well, that's it. You're dealing with the unknown. These just because they're spirits, they're people too. They're just physically removed from their bodies. What they can react and act like anybody. Some are good, some are bad, some have a sense of humor, some don't. Some want you to get out, and some want you to stay. Some want you to hear a story. So you have to be prepared. There's no point in going to look for this stuff. As soon as you find it, you're going to run screaming from the building. What's the point? You might as well just stay home and watch scary movies.
Yeah, for sure. Be prepared, I guess, is the best lesson from that, right? Just be prepared for any situation in life or investigating life. So.
It's yeah. If you look, if you follow that guideline in life, you always do better. You always, you know, people will run left off the side of a hill, and you go turn right, and you're in the clear because hey, I got to go right if something goes wrong. Right. So it's just planning and looking around. You don't even have to plan. Just look around. Just be aware. Hey, where's that go? Where's that door go? You should always think of things ahead of time. We went and did an investigation at Scarborough Hill. We were invited there by city council, and the night we went, he embedded us with two Toronto Star journalists, one a photo journalist and one a writer. And there's a long tunnel down there, and it's got a steel door on it. And people go in there, and if that door shuts, there's no handles. It's just locked, so you're stuck. That's it. You're locked in there. There's no cell service because you're underground, and it's all concrete and cinder block. So you have to look at that and go, this is a hazard. This is dangerous. So you have to put a guide on it. Get somebody to stand by. They have to stand by and make sure that door never closes when you're in there. Because there's no point in the whole team going down the end of that hallway and that door closes on you, which most haunted locations, you see these doors tend to do just what you don't want them to do. And then what do you do? And then you're stuck. And knowing the Scarborough Hills, nobody's going to look for you. It could be months. So you have to look at all these things and be prepared for these things and understand the mechanics of things. And when you're dealing with the supernatural, you have to plan ahead. You have to think, okay, all I need is a trickster and I'm in big trouble. So let's try not to get into trouble. Absolutely not. You should never trespass. And I'll tell you why. Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, it's illegal. You shouldn't be doing it. Two, you're going to be wasting the police response time, where they could be doing other work. But the most important thing, and I hear from a lot of different groups, and they'll call me and they say, hey, I got a great photo, or I got a tremendous EVP, and one of my questions is, how did you get onto the property? Did you ask permission? No, I didn't ask. I trespassed. Right there, I end the conversation. I don't want to deal with them anymore. Because you know what? If you're going to break a law to do something like this, how am I going to believe anything you tell me from that point on? Everything that you gained after you broke that law is garbage to me, because how do I believe you? You might be telling the truth, but hey, you know what? Nothing is sacred to you. You can't even follow the law. So why are you going to follow the rules? So yeah, I just dismiss people like that. If you have to break in or you have to trespass, then whatever you capture it's not worth anything to me. I don't even want to hear about it. No, yeah, I know. It's well, this is the state we're in the paranormal field. It's atrocious. 90% of them are just thrill seekers running around, making noise, causing trouble. Every once in a while you see they burnt down a historic property because they were drinking and messing around. Yeah, I don't get it. I did an article on it oh, I don't know, a few months back. It was picked up in the Chicago Tribune, and it just shows that how horrendous the whole field is. Most of these people came out of these crazy reality TV shows, right? Ghost Adventures or Ghost Hunters. They saw it on TV and went, "Oh, that's cool. I can impress my girlfriend, or I go to a party and be really cool because I look at me, I got night vision." Um, and it's not impressive. It's causing so much harm within the paranormal community because it's so much noise now. It's just noise. It's all background noise. Look at me. Look at me. Look at me. I want to be a TV star. I want to make money. I want to and they're creating hoaxes and lies and fictitious stuff, and they're tying up important properties now. Property owners won't even talk to you because 92 people called her that week and said, "Hey, can I come in? Can I get into your property? Can I do this? Can I do?" So she stopped answering. She doesn't want anybody anymore to come in there. Or there's so much going on now. You need to be insured and bonded to get into a property. You have to $3,000 to get in for a one nighter. People are taking over properties, valuable properties, and doing group investigations now. Right? Hey, you know what? Throw me $50 and bring 28 people, and we can run around this haunted property all night. It's just ridiculous. And the big one's pushing that agenda is, Zach from Ghost Adventure started that. He'd go around and go, "Hey, you let us in, and we'll build this really cool haunted thing about your property, and you give us a cut, and we'll drive all kinds of people to your property. You could do ghost tours, right?" And now Kindred Spirits is doing it as well. They're running around trying to haunt properties so they can do ghost tours and make some extra pocket money. So I mean, it's just causing all kinds of damage. It's not about the fame. It's not about the fortune. We do the work because we love the work. It's a passion. You do this because you're passionate about it. You want to learn things. You want to discover new stuff. You want to I'm a theorist, so I develop theory, and if people want to listen, I tell them what the new theories are, in hopes that they'll go out and experiment with those theories. Prove me right or prove me wrong. That's what it's all about. It's peer review. That's how we do things. It's you know Paranormal research for life after death falls under parapsychology, and parapsychology falls under psychology, which is a very soft science. Most scientists will laugh at you because they don't even believe it's a science, but it is. It's a soft science, and that's the category we fall under. So we have to do things to the best of our ability. But when you're dealing with the mind or the supernatural, a lot of these things are repeatable, or you can't reproduce them. You can't bring them into a lab to cut them open and examine them like a hard science. So it's a lot of uh, theory, it's a lot of observation, and we try to do the best we can by taking that information and trying to make sense of it, just like a psychologist would. If you ask a scientist, I don't care which type of scientist, ask them how the human mind works, or uh, why we dream. Or they can't tell you. They have no idea. There's dozens of things they have no idea. They can speculate, or they can give you some theory, you know, but they don't know. So it's a lot of theory, and when you look at science, most of it is theory as well. It's their best guess based on certain information. It's their best guess, like dark matter or dark energy. That's the same as ghosts. They've never seen it. They've never felt it, touched it, measured it. They believe it's there. Well, it's interchangeable. Well, I believe ghosts are there. If they've touched me, I've felt them. I've heard them. I've seen them. I've smelt them. but I can't bring it into the lab. It's the same with dark energy or dark matter. They can't bring it into the lab, but they think it's there. So it's a lot of theory. Well, I think the best we're going to achieve is a personal belief. I don't think you're ever going to bring the right kind of evidence forward to convince the masses that, hey, this is real. This is life after death. Here it is. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think it's going to be a personal thing. I think you're going to go out looking for it. You're going to have your own experiences, come to your own conclusions, and you're either going to believe or not believe. And I think that's the best you can hope for. I don't think you'll ever come up with that piece of evidence that's going to sway the masses.
Life is crazy. I don't like it in here.
Hey, what's the matter with you?
Where did you go?
Wild. What's your soul into it? Wild. What's going on around you?